Welcome to Embedded FM, the show for people who love building gadgets. I'm Alicia White, here with Christopher White. Jason Kridner has returned with a cookbook for dogs? Well, I suppose since we talked last time about fun things you can make out of beagles, this may be an improvement. Unless it is a cookbook like To Serve Man. Then maybe not. We'll see.
Hi, Jason. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is for you.
Midday, right around lunchtime for me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Jason Kridner of Texas Instruments and the BeagleBoard.org Foundation. And, I work with the BeagleBone Black quite a bit, and that's an open hardware computer for makers, right? From I like to say kindergarten to Kickstarter, right? So everywhere in between and beyond. So it really lets you do all the things that you can't do with a bunch of the single board computers that are out there today. It's focused on the fact that it's real open hardware, and it's capable of doing real-time stuff at the same time as running Linux. It's got a nice big community out there of other people developing to kind of help you get going, and I think it has the best of the out-of-box experiences for getting started with some of these single board computers. It's got a bunch of add-on boards. Everybody comes up with clicky names for their add-on boards. Can't just call them add-on boards or daughter boards anymore. You got to come up with a short, pithy name. So ours are capes. Lots of people have done clones, and we get started real quick with the Cloud9 IDE, and I think it's the easiest way to kind of get started with programming and building with electronics, and that's kind of what it is.
Cool. And it's often compared with the Raspberry Pi, except the BeagleBone Black is open source.
That's probably the biggest difference. There's a lot more things that comes of what it can do that are different. Just kind of its raw capabilities and the experience when you get started with doing things with it. It's much more of a embedded system type device, right? Sure, you can put a keyboard, monitor, and mouse on it, but it's really geared at making electronics and programming rather than it's just another desktop computer that's cheap. So that's where we're really different, right? It's open hardware, so you can actually change it all to be all exactly what you want and understand all the little bits of it. But it's really about making things rather than just having another screen.
Do you think that having it be open source helps your adoption rate?
I do. Certainly there's all sorts of reasons why it does. It does. These things tend to self-select the type of people that have interest in them, and that means that our audience is a bit more of the kind that wants to do more things with the hardware. They're more fundamentally big believers in openness. So those people are become more attracted to our platform, or they want to actually do something professional out of it. So they don't want to have a lot of barriers to doing things that somebody else decides. So we certainly see, I think, a big increase in adoption. And we also can't measure a lot of our adoption because a lot of our adoption isn't just straight board sales. It's not all about just the almighty, dollar of buy a board, because a lot of the people that are in the BeagleBoard ecosystem are ones that actually using derivative boards or variations of our boards, but they're running some similar software, and also because a lot of things are Linux, we can share back and forth with a lot of the other single board computers. So our ecosystem is bigger than people that just have BeagleBone Blacks. Do the derivatives get in touch with you and say, "Hey, we're using your design, so you can keep track"?
No, some of my clients have said we're using BeagleBone because we're going to use it in the future, and we want to use our own board, and we're going to strip off all this other stuff. So I don't think.
Well, I just meant out of kindness.
Yeah, we do, but it's a small percentage of the people that actually get back in touch with us. There's, if you go to some of the wiki pages, like there's a TI processors wiki that has a list of all these AM335 modules or different derived boards that you can get, and a lot of those guys are really leveraging the software that's coming out of the BeagleBoard community, a lot of the documentation, a lot of the experience that's coming out of there, and it's it's probably in the order of about 5% that actually bother to contact me.
It should be part of the license. You're required to say thank you.
I mean, that's always an interesting debate, right? Do you want to have licenses that that push you back, or are you just trying to make it more freedom? So we're a little bit more on the BSD sort of side of that argument.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Beagles are TI things, and the goal is to sell TI parts.
Well, it's a
part of the goal.
The foundation is independent, and most of our board members are not part of TI. Our only full-time staff member is not an employee of TI. So there's certainly a tie-in to TI, and a lot of what BeagleBoard is coming from that relationship with TI, but it's not just driven by TI. Yeah, I mean it's a lot of the sponsorship that comes from TI is because of that promotion of the TI processors, but that's not what it's all about at the end of the day.
No, because at the end of the day, you have a good single board computer that's flexible and relatively inexpensive. So TI did a good job launching you, but now you're on your own.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book or collaborated on one.
I did. This is actually the second book that I'm listed as a co-author on. The first was Bad to the Bone, and then this one's the BeagleBone Cookbook. There's a good reason I'm listed as the second author in both cases. The professors who were listed as first author did most of the heavy lifting and really a vast majority of the work. So with the Bad to the Bone, it was Stephen Barrett, and this new book, it's Mark Yoder.
How did you meet up with him?
So Kathy Wicks, the TI University Programs Manager, actually introduced him to me, and Steve, Mark, and I have been to a bunch of training sessions together where we've actually taught university professors how to teach courses on embedded Linux, and kind of brought them up to the speed and why embedded Linux is cool, and what types of things you can teach the students and how you go about doing that, and just getting them familiar with what you can do with embedded Linux. And so we've taught those classes together, and some of it was from lessons in teaching the professors. In some cases, it was just a lot of our common community experience. So Mark has been actually publishing course materials on a public wiki for years now around the Beagle boards, the older Beagle boards, and had moved all that material over to the BeagleBone Black, and has been teaching these classes to students. And he does it in a way that's really open. So a lot of the discussion, he has all of his students get out to the BeagleBoard mailing list and start to interact with people. He gets them to publish all their projects and open source repositories. And so he's been having them not just learn about embedded Linux, but really learn about working with an open source community. And that's allowed us to get additional feedback on the types of things he's teaching from not just his students, but from experts in the industry, other people within the Beagle community. And so it's a lot of those lessons learned that kind of help guide this book, to try to have as broad an audience as possible, but not waste experts' time. Just to get people up to speed quickly and kind of finding what they can do with embedded Linux.
Well, and did we ever say the title of this book?
I said it was BeagleBone Cookbook,
okay.
But I'll go ahead and spell it out about 3 or 4 more times. It's a BeagleBone Cookbook, software and hardware problems and solutions, not about cooking dogs.
How tired are you of that joke?
I'm actually not tired of it at all. Maybe I have a pretty warped sense of humor, but I like some off-color jokes. So I love beagles. Please don't think that I actually want to ever cook a beagle, but it's just those sort of contradictions are an enjoyment factor for me.
And it's an O'Reilly book, so you have an animal cover.
We do, and it is a beagle.
I'm so jealous. I had to argue about my animal, and I bet you just got a beagle, and it was cute.
Well, surprisingly enough, we did kind of debate about it a bit, and it's not because whether it's a beagle or not, but he's such a serious looking beagle. And I mean, beagles are, they're work dogs, right? They're
Oh yeah, ours works a lot. It's like getting treats.
This is news to me.
They're supposed to be work dogs.
It's supposed to be, and this is a very, it's a very serious looking dog, and beagles are work dogs, and it actually makes a lot of sense, for relating it to beaglebones. I mean, they can do very much serious work, but he didn't look as friendly and cuddly as what we wanted. So we were actually trying to look for a little bit more, push O'Reilly to give us a little bit more cuddly dog, and that just didn't happen. They had a dog, and they stuck to it, and I just love the fact that it's a beagle, right? So I really shouldn't possibly complain. So don't take this as complaining. But there actually was a little bit of debate to get a more friendly, cuddly beagle.
He does look like he's standing at attention for like the Westminster Dog Show or something.
He does.
Not at all giving you the beagle eyes that are controlling in many ways.
Yeah, he doesn't even have his tongue sticking out, right? I mean, come on.
But it is a cookbook style book. It's recipes, and you come at it with a problem, and it shows you how to solve it, and it isn't read through exactly.
Yeah, you can read it cover to cover. I think it actually makes some sense to do it cover to cover.
It wasn't thrilling read that way.
No,
I mean there wasn't really a story arc.
No, there's not.
No subplots.
You could jump into it at any point, and you're gonna be able to understand it and follow it. It is, there's not a lot of drama as you go through it.
But I remember last year we talked about me having trouble finding consistent sets of instructions, and that's what this was. I mean, it was how do I do this, and it just told me.
Just work, and it's very much geared to that, so that you can get some success on each of the examples that are provided, and it's the types of things that we see people want to do, and so that they can move beyond blinky light, right? So they can actually read a sensor, move a motor, and it's just all told from the perspective of like interacting with electronics. From I've got a computer in the center, and I want to hook up all these sensors and actuators, right? How do I go about doing that? And there is some building on as it moves forward, and in that you might not want to do some of the later things until you do some of the earlier things.
Oh yeah, because it starts out with basics and sensors and displays and motors, and those are all pretty simple, and they're all using BoneScript, the Java-ish thing? JavaScript-ish thing.
It's so BoneScript isn't a language. It's just a library. It's a Node.js JavaScript library that can be run. It's got a browser side extension, so you could run it from a browser as well, just using socket.io commands or socket.io to transport essentially remote procedure calls. So all that, making it more complicated than it needs to be. There's just a JavaScript library, and that's what we use to build examples. It's not saying that gosh, if I'm going to build a real embedded system, make a product out of this, that I'm going to use JavaScript to go and do that. Not saying you can't, you absolutely can, but it's about get that first pass success, right? So move the language to try to not be too much of an issue or a problem.
And it gets you out of the business of, here's the tool set you need to install. Here's the compiler, and here's what we suggest for edit. No, here, it's JavaScript.
Yeah, and it's already installed on the boards when you get them, and there's some tutorials on the boards that you can follow. And this is just, it could be considered an arbitrary choice. I have a bit of a vision as to why I really push JavaScript to people as kind of a first programming language to learn if you're new to programming, and that's because it's absolutely pervasive. It's everywhere. Things are built off of HTML and JavaScript and CSS, and that's the language of the internet. It's you can be used by all types of professionals, even embedded professionals. I think it's really valid for embedded system design. The BoneScript library might not really convince you of that, but it is. And the idea here is just to make sure people can have some success talking to the different sensors, talking to motors, and then so the hardware is working, and then they can start diving into some of the other deeper software components, and it's all open, so you can follow pretty easily. If you read C, you can read JavaScript. It's not that it's different, but it's not so different that somebody who can read C can't figure this out. And for somebody brand new to programming, my gosh, there's some amazing tutorials out there for learning JavaScript. The Khan Academy stuff is fantastic. There's W3 Schools stuff. I mean, there's just so many resources out there for learning JavaScript as a first programming language.
And Node is cool in the same way
Node is awesome.
Python is, that there's all these packages out there. So if you're not super experienced, but you want a piece of functionality, there's probably an NPM install that, I just get this library and then I can call it and I can do, I can interface with this REST API for this thing. And so you can build some Internet of Things devices out of this, probably with, a few building blocks.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in kind of the asynchronous style of JavaScript. And that's one thing you're missing from Python. So the idea that, it's just an event loop, and that's the way you make real-time systems. Okay, yes, garbage collection. Forget about garbage collection. I hope I'm not getting too technical, but not for you guys, I'm sure. But garbage collection is that's not something you really want so much in an embedded system. There are ways you can kind of avoid the garbage collection problems, but setting up events and handlers is absolutely the way you want to build embedded systems. And the JavaScript language is designed to do that really nicely, and Node.js in particular. Everything's done all the libraries are done in an asynchronous manner. You just set up events to handle, okay, a pin goes high, it runs this function. It's just that simple. And it can be structured nicely and cleanly. And so you can have all the different types of events that might occur in a system, and assign them handlers and have them talk to each other in a really clean way, where a lot of, like, when you're writing interrupt handlers, you get this headache of, well, if you touch globals, you might have race conditions and all these other nasty things. That JavaScript makes that stuff go away.
But you don't stay in JavaScript for the whole book.
Absolutely not. We talk about C libraries, including libsoc, libsoc, for doing things in C. We talk about Python, and all the examples in the book. We've actually, I don't know if we've completed this out. I have to actually go look at that, because I think we're going to try to do all the examples in Python and C and all of them. I think that's a promise that we made that we might have forgotten about a little bit, but all this stuff is possible in C and in Python, and we give examples on how to get started with those. And point you to the libraries that you can use to kind of do the same things as we're doing in JavaScript.
Well, in the libsoc and C, actually most of the C stuff seemed in the real-time I/O section, which was kind of you can have a real-time I/O section in Linux?
Oh, here we go.
Well, absolutely. So we take a couple different solutions towards real-time, because real time just means you have to be fast enough to respond to the problem at hand, right? So it doesn't always mean real time kernels or other things that some people associate with real time. It just means that you're going to have a deadline. That deadline might be milliseconds away or even seconds away. And you just kind of have to scale your approach up. So we deal with it by degrees, where we kind of baby step you along a little bit faster and faster and faster ways to go, or more predictable, right? So it's about predicting latency.
Exactly.
And the like Xenomai is
is that how you say it? Because
that's how I say it.
Xenomai, and I was just like,
Zen. So yeah, the XEN part I say Zen.
Yeah.
And then OMAI. I don't know how to do Zenami I think is valid.
Ooh, that actually sounds nice too.
Zenami.
Okay, we're gonna go with that.
But it's AIMAI, so Zenamai? I don't know. I don't know. The English. Let's go back to engineering. It's a kernel that actually sits in parallel to Linux. So you patch the Linux kernel so that you have a way to talk between that RTOS and tasks running in Linux. So it gives you a way to bridge between the two. But essentially, you're not running the real-time stuff in Linux. Essentially, it just runs in a different RTOS that just knows how to talk to Linux, and you just capture higher priority interrupts with it. And so, like, you have a timer tick that's higher priority than the stuff that gets assigned to Linux, and you just run stuff at that higher priority, and then you talk to Linux. And that approach has been done by a number of different solutions. We just have a really nice community around the Xenomai, whatever it is. Mostly this tool kit called Machine Kit. Hopefully I'm not getting too deep here and throwing out too many different terms, but Machine Kit is a fork of Linux CNC. So it's, that's software that's used to control mills and, lathes, 3D printers, all sorts of really, really cool stuff. And it's actually one of these things that the BeagleBone is magically suited for almost. I mean, it's wonderfully fitting for doing these things. And so we have a nice community of people using that particular Xenomai RTOS and parallel to Linux. So they put just a small number of threads on the Xenomai side in Machine Kit, and that allows you to have like a nice fancy GUI for controlling your machine at the same time as driving all the stepper motors and everything in the system in hard real time. They also make use of another thing we talk about in the real-time chapter, which is those PRUs, or the programmable real-time units. Those are a couple of microcontrollers that are sitting on the BeagleBone that are completely idle and open for you to use. They have single cycle latency to the I/O pins, to a number of the I/O pins, and so you can use those PRUs to handle some of the real time tasks in parallel to the main Linux processor, and they're running at 200 megahertz. So you can actually like sit there and do toggle high, toggle low on I/O pins at 5 nanoseconds. So if you wanted, you can generate 100 megahertz waveform out of those PRUs. And people have used that on the capture side to actually build a 100 mega sample per second logic analyzer that's doing 14 channels. Okay, forking too much off, but the idea is, so you've got the real-time kernel, but you've also got these microcontrollers in there, and that Machine Kit software will actually use both, so that the stepper motor pulses are generated by the PRUs, and the kind of the math calculation, the path planning stuff is done in a real-time tasks on the ARM Cortex A8 that's running at a gigahertz, so you can do some really fancy path planning, and they put it all together in this system. And we talk about some of those individual components right in that real-time chapter. So we talk about the Xenomai, how to get started with some of that. We don't go very deep.
No, you really don't. But you do go through how do you patch the kernel for it, and how to configure Linux to use it.
And that's meant to just kind of introduce you to these key technologies and kind of let you know which are the ones that you should really know about, and hopefully give you a little hint as to why. And then there's a lot. You mentioned in some of the prep that, wow, it seems like we're sending people off a lot to websites, and we really are. But the idea here is to make sure that they have a solid background onto why we're sending them off before, so they even know what to go look for.
Exactly.
So just to wrap up the real-time thing, some people feel that if you're running Linux or a Linux-like operating system, that you're no longer a real-time or embedded system. I think it's clear that this is designed to do all kinds of things in that whole space, and that those people might be wrong.
Quit pointing at me. Well, okay, so A, it is using a different kernel, the Xenomai, and B, it is using 2 ARM microcontrollers.
I'm not saying it's not.
PRUs. They're not actually, part of Linux at that point.
Oh, okay. So fun debate here. So with the 4.1 kernel, there's also this thing called Well, there's a few different levels of real time with Linux. So, like, there was somebody at University of San Diego that actually took, um, they're sampling an IMU, inertial measurement unit, over I²C in a user space task, right? So, not in the kernel, not in some real time thread. So they're relying on I think it's a 2 millisecond actually heartbeat. So 2 millisecond heartbeat in order to create a balancing robot. And they're using a user space task to go out and grab values off of this IMU to tell if it's starting to lean one way or the other. So kind of tell what its orientation is, and then drive DC motors, right? That it's actually capturing a little bit of feedback using the quadrature encoders, so it knows where the wheels are. So there's actually some hardware quadrature encoders on the BeagleBone Black. So reading those, they're reading the IMU, and in a user space task, they're able to actually make a robot that's actually really hard to knock over. They call it the Beagle MIP, or the mobile inverted pendulum. And they've published their software on this and kind of how to do it. It's all just a user space Linux task. So when we talk about not being able to do real-time stuff in Linux, you're able to change the priority of threads, boost them up, and even create real-time threads within Linux. Now, there is still an element of unpredictability within an unpatched Linux kernel.
Right, and that's where we come into real time, like real time with the capital R, the capital T.
Well, this robot still, it's soft real time in this case, but this robot doesn't fall over.
Well, no, it doesn't fall over because the BeagleBone is blindingly fast.
Right.
Not because Linux is never starved for anything. So, of course, everything gets handled. It's what happens when things get starved.
When you start adding I/O, right? When you start adding different parallel tasks that might cause something to sit in an interrupt handler or some thread for an extended period of time. And Linux does have a preempt capability. So that means that you can actually, if you turn on preempt as a build flag in the Linux kernel, you can actually go and interrupt the kernel that's running. So you can't just have a kernel thread come and steal all the time. And then you're only kind of stuck with the kind of the interrupt blocking, right? So if you have some long time where interrupts are disabled, and there are some drivers that can be kind of badly formed, but if you make the kernel preemptible, that solves a vast majority of your real-time problems. And then the next kind of level beyond that is actually making your interrupt handlers themselves interruptible, and that's where you become a real-time kernel, right? That's the RT patch. So if you've been around Linux, you've heard of preempt, and maybe you've heard of preempt RT. So preempt RT is a patch to the Linux kernel to actually go and enable those, and that's not yet mainline. But a lot of the people using the BeagleBones actually do apply that preempt RT patch. And we've been trying to get closer and closer to mainline. We have a very nice 4.1 Linux kernel, and just recently the preempt RT patch has been released for 4.1. So if you do that, that makes Linux a real-time operating system. It's not yet the mainline Linux, but you can actually patch Linux to be a true real-time operating system and not just have this funny parallel kernel thing.
And that's not only fast, because you can get around a lot of latency issues with just being fast. That is truly capital R, capital T real time, where you have a fixed latency. You can say that this interrupt will never be handled later than this amount of time.
Yeah, and that's short of some catastrophically stupid bugs and software bugs in the system. But if you understand most of your system, you can still, without the RT kernel, guarantee real time. If you kind of understand what the software and worst case latencies are that you're going to build into the system. RT is really just a workaround for not understanding what your worst case interrupt handler time is. So it's still just kind of it's making it hard real time by saying, well, okay, well, I don't have to understand all this stuff. If you really, really, really want to make a real-time system, you just have to understand everything that's in the system. Like, what are these elements that are going to cause me to get into states where I don't respond in time? And, having that RT patch just reduces the number of things that you have to know about in order to make that true.
Exactly. Making it easier for people, which is what the BeagleBone seems to be about.
Very much so. For all types of problem. And for people that don't want to run, Linux, I think Linux does make things easier, and then it brings this huge community around it where people are trying to solve this huge variety of problems. And that's what makes Linux, interesting to take as an approach. But if you want to take all this stuff on yourself, I mean, running without an operating system, you'd save a lot of money because you don't have to buy that stupid memory chip that sits out there if you take Linux away.
Well, and there are other operating systems that run on the Beagle board. We've had the Artems, Joel from Artems.
Yeah.
That runs on a BeagleBone Black. So if you want something that's been to space, you can have that.
Absolutely, yeah. No, Artems is fantastic, and they're doing some more work on their BeagleBone Black port this summer as part of Google Summer of Code. We've tried to support their students a little bit on that. So Artems is fantastic. It's open source. It's got a good community. But there's a number of other ones. I'm going to do a controversial shout out right here, just because. Did you know that Windows Embedded, Windows CE or what is that, Compact Embedded or something like that, is actually a true real time operating system?
That was my head hitting the desk.
I appreciate that.
I haven't heard anything since you were talking about Artems.
Oh, did you get lost in Artems?
I think you just didn't want to.
Oh, I see.
But there's a bunch of other open source ones, right? So BSD runs on BeagleBone. I'm very happy about that.
While we're on the topic of operating systems and Google, I was wondering if you've been following. They've been talking about an Internet of Things operating system called Brillo for a while. Is that something you're following, or that could become a possibility?
Uh-oh. Hadn't heard of that. I should have.
It's supposedly a cut-down version of Android for use on, embedded systems.
Maybe I have heard of it.
I don't know if it's available yet or if they're still just talking about it, but yeah, I should check it out.
I like that Brillo was the highest search. What you're talking about was the first thing on the search page, but all the pictures are for the scrubby thing.
It's a terrible name.
I know Google uses BeagleBones a lot for their development. I was actually really impressed with a lot of work they did for Project Ara. I don't know if you've seen, that's the open source phone that they partnered up with. Somebody did a big Kickstarter for an open hardware, open source phone. And there's been a lot of open source phones built around Beagle. The OpenMoco, they did a version.
Oh, okay.
Where they took it. So the GTA 04, they actually took an original Beagle board and kind of merged it into the older OpenMoco and made the GTA 04. So there's been a lot of efforts of doing open phones with Beagle. Used the same processor for the original Beagle that was used in the Nokia N900, which is one of the nice open phones, and then the N9. Anyway, so we have a lot of connections to people doing open phones, and in Project Ara, they did a lot of the development work for that interconnect bus with BeagleBones. They built a lot of the test infrastructure, a lot of the examples with BeagleBones, and that one's a pretty fun little project. I don't know if you've seen the interconnect. You guys are like to play with hardware, right? You should check out the interconnect bus that they built for Project Ara.
Cool. You mentioned Google Summer of Code. You've got some of those students too.
We do. So we've got 8 projects going this summer. We had, I think we ended up with 6 last summer, and that's absolutely one of my favorite parts of working on BeagleBoard as the GSOC students. That's a program where Google sponsors the students to write open source code, open source software over the summer, and they get like $5,000. It's a full-time job for the students over the summer. So we do see a lot of people doing that in other countries around the world. They have to be enrolled in a university to participate in Google Summer Code.
But they do it from their home location. They don't come to you.
They do. They just do it right where they're at. And we interact mostly on IRC and on our mailing lists. We occasionally will do Google Hangouts or some other things like that to kind of interact with each other. But mostly it's all just good old IRC, internet relay chat. So we like that. And the projects are fantastic.
You have a BeagleSat and a BeaglePilot that's an underwater drone. Those are my two favorite of your list.
So I'll start with the Beagle, the BeaglePilot 2.0, because last summer we had a BeaglePilot where they ported Ardupilot, which is an autopilot software for Arduino, for the Arduino boards and microcontrollers based off of that. That's used to essentially do flight planning. So there's this APM. There's this flight planning software that you can run on your computer and talk to the boards and set them to essentially fly completely autonomously, and and they'll do all the keeping the vehicle level, sending it different directions, reading in the GPS values, and kind of dealing with all that stuff. And they ported that over to BeagleBone last summer. Since then, we saw the Linux Foundation actually pick up and do Dronecode. So a lot of that work in porting the Ardupilot over to Linux is that basis for doing the Dronecode project for the Linux Foundation. And so you see the same people kind of leading up that effort, and so we've got a bunch of drones built out of BeagleBone Blacks that people are using. The guy that was one of our GSOC students went out and started a company called Early Robotics. Now one of the reference platforms for Ubuntu Snappy, which is this kind of container stuff, and I could just keep dropping crazy technology terms and stuff. It's not really what I want to do, but they're doing some cool stuff with drones with Beagle, and all that work is continuing to go influence a lot of other projects. And now they've turned those guys have turned their attention to underwater drones, just a little bit, right? They're still doing a lot of times in air drones, but they said, okay, come on, this stuff has got to be compatible with adding some autonomy to the underwater drones. So they've used the OpenROV, which is also BeagleBone Black based, as their kind of test vehicle for developing, moving that BeaglePilot or Ardupilot code that's running on Linux and moving that into an underwater vehicle.
An OpenROV is the underwater exploration robots, and its remote operating vehicle is the ROV.
That's the ROV term, is remotely operated vehicle. And here, I guess they're trying to turn it into a, remotely autonomous vehicle, or something like those. So it's all open hardware. They came out of a Kickstarter. It's one of my favorite BeagleBone projects.
As I was, quote, prepping for the show, I came across a shark named Poor Beagle, which is a portmanteau of porpoise and beagle. I just wanted you to know about that for when they're naming their projects.
See, I'm starting to think I was born at the wrong time, because when I was a kid, I remember trying to design a submarine that would live in Dana Point Harbor, and so nobody would know what was down there, and it would go around autonomously and spy on the boats and stuff. And it was completely impossible now. And I'm just thinking, well, that would be pretty easy.
No.
Okay, that would be doable.
If you talk
don't discourage him. Don't discourage him.
I spoke with an underwater, with the OpenROV, one of the people who works on it, a couple of years ago, and he's like, it's really not very hard in my bathtub.
Don't have a lot of places to go. Yeah. Dealing with those environmental conditions, I imagine, is a little tricky. I would like to try it out, though.
Yeah. In some place like Lake Tahoe that's so clear. I don't know about going in ocean. There's a lot of potential for
well, you can't be nefarious in Lake
poor
Tahoe.
beagles.
Don't drown them. Don't mistreat them.
But going into space with the BeagleSat, it's sort of a harsh environment too.
Yeah, and that's actually a huge interest area right now around Beagles. So a lot of the people developing the CubeSat containers have actually used BeagleBones to kind of test their satellite, right? To test the the payload connections, because they'll have different USB and serial connections to the CubeSat payloads. And a lot of them on the ground are using BeagleBones to test those, and they're looking to try to provide references for people to actually what they can put in payloads into outer space. And we've had quite a few launches. I'm trying to find the documentation of where how high it's been, and and I've not been able to. If anybody hears this, has launched a BeagleBone Black into space, please get back in touch with me. But I know a lot of people have been looking at that problem, and I think it's actually had a few launches, but I'm not finding good documentation of that. I've got documentation of high orbit balloons. People have taken them up and that and used them to take pictures, collect data.
A lot of the microsats are just tossed out of the International Space Station, or
so I don't know what you know about the CubeSats.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
So the CubeSats are these 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeter cubes. So it's kind of a standard format. And yeah, they attach them to the International Space Station. But that's not I think that's not the only ones. But they'll launch up these ones, and getting space on one of those is actually pretty affordable. I mean, affordable like a car affordable, but affordable. Not like oh my gosh, I'm doing your own satellite launch. I'd say most of your listeners probably can't afford that.
Well, we've had...
And if they can, they should contact us.
We've had some local high schools, and they do funding drives, and like every other year they end up with one of these little satellites.
Yeah.
And so it's a big community effort, but it's also something, if you have more money than sense, it's fun. I shouldn't say that because Stuart's going to be on the show, and I think he's working on a CubeSat. So it's also really great if you're Stuart. All right.
So what the challenge with the BeagleSat guy, that project is working on, is really compensating for some of the interference that comes from being on the satellite. So the satellites themselves actually generate some RF signals and stuff that can get in the way, and they're essentially trying to mask out those. I guess it's a common problem when you're stuck really close and you can't be put out on a far boom to get away from the other sources of noise, and just kind of filtering out those in your data collection.
Well, this isn't space hardened hardware either. There's a lot more radiation and things that you have to deal with, which may not be a problem on these things because
they're not meant to last.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people are willing to put up this consumer grade hardware because it's just like, oh, we'll collect some data, send it back, and when it burns up, it burns up. And so a lot of people are perfectly willing to get started with that. But there's the interest level is really increasing, and it's like, what is it going to take to space harden a BeagleBone, right? And that's we've gotten some pretty hard recommendations from some of the space developers, of things we can do with it. I mean, there's a lot of legitimate commercial interest in BeagleBones in space.
Well, the heat dissipation or large range of temperature, that's got to be something you hear, because BeagleBones in cars is another thing that I hear about, and that's a huge temperature range.
Yeah.
I guess
And
space, you have the
fortunately,
radiation
I don't
hardening
know
too.
which one is, a whole lot better. I guess more of the concern is, I think, about the radiation, because
Yeah.
there in the containers, there's going to be a certain amount of protection, and when it's actually operating, it's mostly just really cold. When it's actually running, because within a car, you're mostly dealing with kind of the absolute max heat sort of issues, um,
No,
and
cars
and,
have
and
cold issues too, because when they're
there
parked,
are
they get really cold.
In Minnesota.
And so you have to
so
deal
the
with
hold
the
time,
whole.
your hold time stuff gets to be the issue rather than the setup time
Yeah.
for catches on the flip flops, right? So, and yeah, and a lot of stuff isn't built with with the zero hold time specifications. So a lot of them are, there's definitely components in there for which there's expected to be a minimal propagation delay. Um,
Well,
I don't.
and I think I remember reading an article recently about New Horizons where they were flabbergasted that it was running on a MIPS R3000 or something. And people are always amazed that, no, it's running on this ancient hardware. Well, it's really expensive ancient hardware that's specifically designed to meet these requirements.
Yeah, but there's I think that we're going to see some stuff that's like the BeagleBone Black. It'll be a while before it makes it to Pluto, but I think there's enough interest in having a platform like that, because it's so easy to get engaged in, and that desktop high school level, and so you have so many people able to have the skills to go and do interesting experiments and development. And now the trick is just how do we characterize it sufficiently so that we know what the failure modes are going to be in these harsh environments. And that's one place where we're kind of reaching out to people right now to actually give us some of that data. And it's vibration data. It's the heat performance. There is a industrial spec parts, and trying to get the space hardened parts is it's
Expensive?
It's an interesting
Difficult?
challenge. It's expensive. It's absolutely expensive.
Okay, so switching topics. What does the BeagleBoard Foundation do? I mean, it's not TI, it's beagleboard.org Foundation, isn't it?
It is. It's beagleboard.org Foundation. From a business standpoint, it's mostly logo licensing and promotion, right? It's people that are in the ecosystem, helping to get them known about, and kind of promoting the ecosystem altogether. So, if you're making a derivative and you want to say that it's 100% compatible with the software, and it's really part of the ecosystem and supporting the ecosystem, and you want it to bear that logo, then you can pay a license fee, do all the appropriate testing, interact with the community in the proper way, and kind of get to that point of having that logo. We're seeing a lot of people kind of take off to that, and that feeds back into the org and helps support the marketing side of things. But it's also very much focused on the education side of things. Making connections to various professors that are developing curriculum around the BeagleBones. Occasionally doing donations, but really trying to partner with other people for doing donations. And kind of pushing the priorities about solutions needed for developing curriculum, and most of that's been geared at the university level as of now. But there's a real attempt by the org to try to get down into the high school level of education.
And you work for both them and for TI.
I do. I'm on the board for the BeagleBoard.org Foundation, and my job at TI has pretty much become BeagleBoard. So I work for TI, but my non-BeagleBoard related tasks are mostly on consulting on open source, and and learning how trying to teach people at TI how to interact with open source software and open hardware communities. Kind of informing them about how people are using this technology. And that's justified because because there's so much visibility of BeagleBoard that so many people are choosing to pick up the processors and use them into different products, right? So, supporting people and making that transitions, making the connections back into TI. But I don't have a lot of non-BeagleBoard tasks at TI right now, and I work from home.
Well, what's your day-to-day job like? I mean, you work from home, you get up in the morning, none of us actually put on anything but our bathrobes and then we get to work, right? I mean,
yeah, well, there's a couple of windows near my desk, so if I, were too, yeah, I do try to get dressed in the morning, but that, my commute is nice and short. My typical day, I'll go for a walk in the morning before I start having any calls. Got a little bit of woods in back and got a nice wooded neighborhood, and we'll go walk around and kind of get started, talk about some of the things we have to do for the day. So my wife is actually heavily involved in the org. So we will spend the morning talking about types of things that we want to go and try to solve around the org for that day. I'll get back. I'll maybe work on a few of the coding projects. Maybe send out a few emails to the Google Summer of Code students, and then try to think about how we can best help the people trying to build the ecosystem. Spend a lot of time on GitHub and IRC and email. But the IRC is kind of my window to the outside world. Keeps me from feeling isolated sitting at my desk. It's a lifesaver. Just trying to stay motivated, try to stay focused. Try to because a lot of times you run into engineering problems, right? Just talking about them is the best way to get unstuck. Even if nobody gives you the answer, right? Just kind of spelling them out so you understand the problem. A lot of times will lead you to the right solution. But I spend a lot more time talking, and traveling than I think what a typical engineer would like. I'd love to spend more time coding.
Well, it is fun. Do you have any projects in mind that you're thinking about starting?
Yeah, so many. One of the things I've got a new home. A few months ago, there's a lot of projects around the house I'm looking at starting where there's a lot of Beagle tie-in. I've got a Beagle-controlled sprinkler system. I want to do some write-ups on that. I'm looking at doing a lot more home automation. I'm hoping I can convince some of these guys that are doing some of the home automation solutions or just the home gateway sort of solutions around BeagleBone will ship me some hardware. So shout out if you've got Zigbee or even X10 controlled switches I can replace in my house, and you want to get a nice write-up on a blog post, you can send me some hardware. There's too many switches. Oh my gosh, I looked at some of the, I don't know if you guys have looked at some of the Zigbee switches or Z-Wave switches.
Yeah, it's
my gosh, they're like $30 a pop. And you start replacing 40 switches, and it's like, I don't know. I don't think I can justify spending org money on my own house. That doesn't work.
It's testing.
Is it a licensing issue with Z-Wave that it's just because everything else seems to get cheaper?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting. I really should try to find out what is the source of the cost coming from. Yeah, I don't know. This home automation stuff is expensive, and I think people really need some good practical solutions so they can kind of take care of it and control it themselves. There's some really interesting solutions out there, but they all seem way too expensive for me right now.
Well, and I think that's why the Internet of Things gets a bad rap for consumers, in part because it does. It's just been expensive, and it's stayed expensive.
Well, it's bimodal. Some of the stuff's really expensive, and some of it hasn't stayed expensive. And I think, there's a little bit of cachet of you throw internet on something and suddenly you can drive the margin up 50%. So,
yeah.
Well, I think in general, a lot of home components are just expensive too. So it's not just if they're connected or not. Because I think that adds pretty marginal costs, right?
I think it's marginal cost if you look at the BOM, but if you are a light switch company and then you add a whole electronics division, the NRE is
software.
Crazy.
Yeah, I agree. But it seems like the ones that have actually launched solutions out there haven't done all that software integration engineering work either, right? So they're charging you the NRE for it, but they haven't actually done the work.
Okay, I have a couple of listener questions for you.
Cool.
First from Andre. Wow, that is not really the nicest of questions. All right, Andre, I'm just going to quote you. It is exceedingly hard to get a hold of the field support engineers. What is happening at TI/Freescale/AD Analog Design that took away the field support people?
Field support?
Field support.
Field support. Oh.
We're not supporting seals. We're cooking beagles, but we're not supporting seals.
I don't know why it's hard. I mean, I don't think it's hard to get a hold of me, and maybe some folks will tell me different. You can find my phone number out on beagleboard.org/about and email address, and I'm on IRC, and you can ping me. And if you're having difficulty getting support around something with Beagle, I mean, the thing I ask is send an email to the community, because most likely you're going to get a support answer from them, and they're going to people on the mailing list, and that's going to be better than an answer you can get from me most of the time. And if they don't get a quick answer, then say I don't mind people harassing me. If they've posted it to the community mailing list and the e2e.ti.com forums, then start harassing me and telling me, hey, I'm not getting this response. And I'm sure there are cases that fall between the cracks, but I know that the TI support engineers at the factory are graded pretty heavily on responses to e2e.ti.com, and that the team that supports the processor on the BeagleBone Black is pretty proud of their support work. As far as the field guys themselves go, I don't know. I think there's been a lot of focus in the industry towards it kind of ebbs and flows with focus on larger, smaller number of customers versus broader number of customers. And there's just kind of that pain in the industry of kind of the ebb and flow of that. Right? It's like we'll see vertical focus for a few years, then a mass market focus for a few years, then a vertical focus for a few years. I'm always focused on mass market. That to me has always been what's interesting, and all the innovation to me happens really out on the edges. And enabling that innovation and being part of innovation is what excites me about my job. So you won't find me just kind of getting locked into one particular end system and living on solving the last possible nuance of something on just one particular system. So
it sounds like forums, and I hate forums, so I never go to them.
I know, but
yeah, it makes sense, because then they're solving the problem for multiple people.
Yeah, it gives you that scale, and if you feel like you're missing that one-on-one engineer field support, a lot of times the sad truth is you're just probably don't sound like that great of an opportunity. You're probably just not doing that much. Something that sounds that interesting, and I hope that doesn't sound too assaulting to your listener.
Right. Always click the "I'm shipping 100,000 in the next year" box.
Always. But that doesn't mean that you can't get support. And I know forums can be discouraging for some people, but that's why I'm trying to say that, hey, if you need that human to interact with, as long as I'm saying is if you make sure that you try. The broader community first, but then just contact me and please make it about Beagle or the chips on Beagle. And I hope that other people are willing to stand behind what they do that much. And I'm only able to do this because there is such a strong community behind it. I mean, I just don't feel that worried that you're gonna I don't know, make me look too awful, because I think that when you look at the type of answers that you'll get through the community, I mean, it's kind of been done before, and if you can't figure it out, it's probably because you're not trying.
I don't know. That seems, yeah,
Too harsh.
Yeah, I mean, you're TI. I'm not going to use TI because it isn't quite fair. Although I have had similar interactions with TI. Another company whose name begins with A is very nice, very cool, very focused on lots of people, and yet their newest thing points to one of their older forums, which, if you post there, everybody says this is not the place for that chip. That chip is too new. We are only for the original version of this thing. And it's like, okay, I went to the official page, I followed the links, and now you've jumped down my throat. I have nowhere to go. And I don't think that this is just me. You end up, if you have all these giant product lines, and like, where do you stop the, like the CC2000 line for TI? There's a great line. There's lots of neat stuff in there. But there's
Absolutely.
the very old stuff and then the new like Piccolo motor controllers. And they have some of the same foundations and some of the same forums, but you can easily end up in the wrong place because you are on the new thing but posting to the old things forum because they both say CC2000.
Versus Piccolo, or
I wonder if it's about, I mean, I went to the TI website, to the E2E Forums, and you have terms of service and you have privacy policy. They're both lots of legalese. And we've been hearing about conferences and whether or not they have, what is the policy? Anti-harassment policies.
Yeah.
It would be nice.
Well, if to have those policies, they have to be heavily moderated too, and now you have to have people who are.
But these forums are for getting help.
Yes.
Are you concerned that like in the E2E that people are too abrasive? Or any forum, right? I mean, there depends on what type of forum you're going to, and on what
one of these company support forums. We're gonna stick to a company supported support forum, where it isn't the company people who are saying you're wrong, you're in the wrong place, you're an idiot, which is always what it seems to be.
Okay, it's the other people.
People.
It's not the Okay, and because I think that generally, I mean, those of us at TI would take it, very personal if you're getting a bad experience from a fellow TIer, and that they're being, abrasive to you. I think that we would naturally be very upset with that that individual,
and that's fair.
But we have to give a little bit of lenience to other people that are coming on the forums, but I don't think that we would tolerate them being something that would qualify as, real as harassment, right? And I think that you do have recourse towards that, but I don't think you're going that far. I think you're saying that
no, they aren't being
just because they're
just being jerks, not being.
Are you saying because it's a forum, you're automatically hesitant?
Yes, absolutely.
Not because there's anything specific on that forum, but other forums have.
Well, gosh, if there were just less semiconductor options, then you could, if there were only 10 different chips out there, then all the people at these different companies can just focus on supporting these 10 chips,
and you can actually
get to know the person that's going to support you, because he only has to worry about or focus on one chip, and so you can get to know that guy, and right, and it all just works out nice. And it's just a sort of a complexity of the economy we have right now, there's so many different problems to solve, and you're not able to go to just one person, right? You have to have this wide variety of people and solutions, and so to try to scale up to that, you're it's not, you're not always dealing with the same person, so it's not this one-on-one personal relationship. And that's why solutions that really cover a broad set of problems, something like a Beagle, I think, are especially appealing, right? You kind of look for that lightning in the bottle solution, where you have a hammer, right, which is very general, hammers and nails, right? It's a very general solution that solves a lot of problems. And I think that's where you see a lot of that consolidation in the market, where people I don't need this huge variety of things. I need one thing that's very flexible that I can solve a lot of problems with. And that way I'm not left with this, this challenge of, okay, here's the perfect solution, and I've gone down and narrowed it down, but I can't find anybody that's going to help me out on that solution, because that engineer has gone off to build 10 other products, and there's not a big support staff around them. I think it's a very interesting dynamic, and you even got you've got all these semiconductor companies popping up. State-sponsored semiconductors coming out of large countries, and building things for phones and tablets, and just these things that go into high volumes. And then lots of people finding, oh well, there's some wonderful engineering going into these things, and but how do I really get the details and the support and everything else around them? And that becomes really difficult. And I hope that people are experiencing TI as being kind of an exception to that, more so. I mean, we're certainly subject to all the same laws of physics, but I hope that people are finding TI to be at least a little bit of a breath of fresh air in that climate.
I don't know how to compare. I'll keep that in mind, and we'll think about it. Anybody has any particular things they'd like to bring up about the forums and better ways to use them? Chris and I are going to
even guidance on how to make, you can't hire an infinite number of field apps engineers, but so that everybody has their assigned engineer. But how do you make the ones that are out there more accessible, right? So how as a large company do we make sure that our employees that are out in the field, are more accessible to the individual developer? I think those sort of guidances, because it's not all about directing people to the forums. I completely agree with your listener about that. I mean, it just can't be the answer to everything. But how do we do both, right? Increase the usefulness of the forums, make them more friendly, and then how do we make everyone in a large company more accessible? Because I think that's a huge benefit for the people in the field, and all the people that I run into a field, I encourage to go out to the maker fairs, the local maker fairs, because they'll find real opportunities for TI by going to these places and meeting with the people that are acting, especially like a lot of the local hacker spaces. And I think TI engineers are always very curious and reaching out and learning about what people are doing in their local communities. I think that's one of the wondrous things about working in a really large company. It's something that keeps me at TI.
Well, now the TI booth at the ESC is just going to have to be really nice now that you've set this bar nice and high.
ESC is great, but don't forget to go to the maker fairs too.
Well, yeah,
everything from pros to do-it-yourselfers.
The maker fair is a great place to hang out with people. ESC is just next week, and so it's, or actually it will be about the time this is posted. We'll be wrapping up. So.
And I'm getting all these pings from people, my friends at ESC, which is one of my favorite shows, and that I won't be going this year.
It's a lot smaller this year. We'll see how it works out. It's not a bad year to miss. Maybe next year. So I think we're about ready to wrap up. Christopher, did you have any remaining questions? No. You didn't want the quiz question?
There's a quiz question?
Yeah.
What's the quiz question?
How many definitions of the word beagle do you know?
Okay. How many definitions of the word beagle do you know?
I only know I'd say a couple, maybe three. But are there any that aren't a noun? Can I ask for hints?
There's one that's a verb.
Ooh. Okay, well, maybe I just learned a new definition. I would have to think if you're beagling, you're searching.
No, you're hunting with rabbits.
That's close.
You're hunting
That's
rabbits
close.
with beagles.
That's close.
It's going to hunt with beagles. It's not just being Snoopy.
If you're beagling, you're specifically hunting rabbits?
Well, you're specifically hunting. It depended on the exact definition, but you're hunting with a beagle horde or whatever they're called.
Okay, cool. Obviously the dog.
Yeah.
I would think that at this point, there's got to be a space reference when it comes to Beagle, because it was the vehicle.
Oh yeah, right.
That first landed on the moon.
Well, and it was one that missed Mars, which sounds very Beagle-like.
It missed Mars?
That was the British.
British
probe.
Oh,
yeah. And if you've ever had a beagle, they're just so focused on their noses, they go everywhere.
Was that that wasn't the units calculation? That was the one that burned up.
God, that kills everybody.
So there was a space vehicle called Beagle that
it landed
Mars.
and then they never heard from it again. And I think they got some pictures
that is
of
the
it.
units calculation one then, right?
No, that was an American probe.
Okay,
I don't remember. The units calculation one landed, and they have photos of it from the orbiter. I think it had some issue where it didn't open properly, so it had no solar power.
Okay, so we're adding a definition right now. I'll go change wordnik and say it is a class of spacecraft that mysteriously fail, often due to unit calculations.
No, I think they're totally off on that. I think, but come on, but the most famous Beagle in space has to be the Lunar Lander. Come on.
Beagle?
Come on.
Is it the Beagle?
Name of lunar lander.
Oh my God! Now we're fact checking real time.
Real time fact checking.
This is what our listeners like.
This is not. Okay, now name of Beagle.
Name of Beagle.
The Beagle 2.
Oh, you know what? I think I'm confusing it with the Eagle.
Or the Beagle 2
I think I've just said that
Mars one.
so many times because it's the Eagle.
It's the Eagle.
It was the Beagle in the Peanuts cartoon in the comics, and I used to think it was the Beagle too. Now that yes, we can just add a B though, and it's done.
All right.
Oh, I don't like where this is headed at all.
Okay, so for those of you keeping score, the Eagle was the lunar lander. The Beagle was the Mars probe that from Britain that went badly.
And I've been enjoying the rhyme for so long, and I never even heard of this British probe. So I've been enjoying the rhyme so long that I'd actually convinced myself that was the original name.
I'm pretty sure in the Peanuts comic that Snoopy landed on the moon, and it said the Beagle had landed. So I too had that in my head.
Yeah, it's something I tend to say to myself every time a plane lands. The Beagle is landing.
Okay. So having added a definition, or maybe not, you still have 2 more to go.
Oh, 2 more. Well, I have to think that the Beagle board would be 1, right?
Okay, now you still have 2 more to go.
Rats. Am I going to get one off the top? Are they still nouns?
Yeah. You can give up. It's okay. There's no prize.
You don't get Alicia's voice on your home answering machine.
If I could think of any horrible guesses that would actually be somehow entertaining, but I really have nothing. I can't even make one up. I would be a horrible guest on.
One of them is a type of dog.
No, he got that one.
Oh.
One is a person who acts like said type of dog. A person who snoops on others. A detective. That's actually in books. Like Sherlock Holmes was a great beagle.
Legal
right,
beagle.
Legal beagle. Oh yeah.
And then
also eagle.
There was one I hinted at earlier, the poor beagle, which is a shark, and so they call a group of small sharks. And I think it's a Canadian thing, but I'm not sure it's a Canadian, maybe Australian, maybe somebody could tell me. But a local colloquial name for several species of smaller sharks is a beagle.
Yeah, that's not going to be common knowledge.
Pretty esoteric, I have to say.
I did try to scale these as easy to hard. Yes, he got 2 points.
I got 1 out of 4.
Well, we're going to make it 2 points out of 5. That's
well, as our inaugural quiz corner section of the show, I'm not sure that was a rousing success.
all right. Oh, I think that we can be done now. Jason, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I'd prefer to talk about it, but I think that there's a lot to be done to make programming and electronics more accessible to more people and more barriers. I think that we're in a world where we're still very much getting these amazing pieces of technology that the vast majority of people that we interact with on a daily basis have absolutely no ability to comprehend. And I think that's a sad state. And I think that if we do more to focus on enabling people to build things with programming and electronics, and I think there's some of that going on, but I think there's room for a whole lot more, that I think we're going to end up with a better world where we're not slaves to our technology, but rather technology serves us. And, there's so many things that we can go and build, and I could just go off for weeks. I know you're wanting to wrap up, but I just encourage you to reach out to me personally, or Christy at beagleboard.org. If you're wanting to get involved with teaching people about programming and electronics, I think that we have a pretty unique experience with the BeagleBone Black and kind of the Bone 101 tutorial system, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing with the Google Summer of Code, and a lot of the stuff that I can't yet talk about, and really looking for people to get involved that want to change the world through making it easier to work with programming and electronics.
Well, and you've made some strides with that, in part from this new Beagle cookbook.
I think it's a nice start, and if you enjoy it, I think there's
lots more,
a lot of ways to go. Yeah. And I think we've already started work on BeagleBone Cookbook 2. I wouldn't expect to see that in on shelves anytime soon, but there's work there. There's a second edition of Bad to the Bone, which had incredibly mixed reviews, and so for all the negatives that were out there about it, there's a second edition that's already prepped. It's really being held up by me getting my good review time into it, but Stephen Barrett has already put a huge amount of work into it, kind of addressing a lot of the issues that were raised, and a lot of them had to do with the same things that the types of concerns that you were raising, Alicia, that there wasn't enough on real time and dealing with more traditional embedded electronics in that book, because it dealt with things that that Linux level, and a lot of people are looking to go deeper.
Cool. I look forward to it.
Cool. And
there's a new BeagleBone coming out.
There is the BeagleBone Green.
Green.
Coming out, if that's what you're looking at. That's not that's a seed product, not a beagleboard.org product, but it is BeagleBone or BeagleBoard compatible, is the term that we're using, and I'm super excited about it because it's it makes the real differentiation for it is these Grove connectors, and so if you want to wire up a bunch of different sensors and actuators to it, you don't have to do any wiring whatsoever. You just plug these things in. Working on a lot of the software experience for that now, and I expect that to be something to iterate, but I think it's a great relationship between beagleboard.org and Seed Studio.
I actually meant the BeagleBoard X15, the one that was teased in the
Well, that's not a BeagleBone, that's a BeagleBoard. We have two lines, of products. We have the BeagleBoard line, which is kind of our high-end line, and the BeagleBones, which is the bare bones BeagleBoards. So there's more stripped down, focused more on real embedded type of stuff, and more headless. Even though BeagleBone can have screens and monitors, keyboard, mice, stuff, but you can use it as a desktop. But it's less focused on the desktop experience. So that's kind of the two lines. And the BeagleBoard X15 is a prototype. Right now, it's in the prototype stages of a replacement for the BeagleBoard XM, which is still rather popular. So that's the extra MIPS, extra memory Beagle board, right? From the original Beagle board. And it's, got, full size HDMI and USB hub. It's got the DSP acceleration for doing higher multimedia performance stuff. But the XM is getting a little bit long in the tooth. And so that's why we've been prototyping X15. We've got a handful out in community members' hands right now. And, we're continuing to work on moving it forward, but we haven't officially press released, announced anything. We just work very openly. So most of our stuff that we're working on, we try to keep open to the community. So I don't have any big announcements on that, although it is a pretty cool little machine. It's got things like USB 3, gigabit, dual gigabit Ethernet, more memory, a whole lot more performance, and a whole lot more. I kind of call it it's either affectionately called the Beast, or kind of mission. There's a core for that because there's just a huge number of heterogeneous programmable cores in it for doing all sorts of crazy fun things.
Wow, that does sound like quite a beast. Cool.
Yeah. It's not it's less focused on kind of your beginning maker and much more focused on I just can't find a technical solution for that. I need something much higher performance and much more capable, and I'm ready to make a big step up.
I need a sledgehammer. That's what this board says to me is I need a sledgehammer for this problem.
Yeah, and it definitely fits that billing.
Oh, cool. I'm glad we got to talk more about the BeagleBone Black because that is more our core area, but this is pretty neat too.
Yep, and we're going to see some fun demos on that, and stay tuned. But also stay tuned on all these different BeagleBone Black clones and derivatives. I think that's one of the big things I'm really excited about in 2015 is just really seeing a lot more people take that design and do some innovation around it. And make it easier for people to do derivatives, right? So we're focused a lot on making some of these designs a lot more easier. Sorry about that. A lot easier for people to make derived designs out of.
And that's good because they aren't as rare as they were when we talked a year ago.
Oh yeah, that was a huge problem last year, and fortunately, it's a very solved problem. Availability of BeagleBone Blacks is excellent now. Increasing our manufacturing partners and just doubling down on it. They're selling more than ever, and availability. It's real easy to go and grab one. Oftentimes, you can go and just walk into your local micro center and grab one.
Cool. Good to know. All right. I think we should all get back to our days.
Really enjoyed talking with you. I love the some of the deeper dives on some things, and hopefully I didn't throw out too many terms. I'd love to actually spend some more time talking about that at our next time we meet up at a show. Cool.
I look forward to it. And we do have lots of links. And if you heard a term and you didn't get a link on it, just let me know. Drop us a line. It is show@embedded.fm or hit the contact link on embedded.fm. My guest has been Jason Kridner of Texas Instrument and BeagleBoard.org Foundation. Last week, Jen put her title as International Puppy Consultant. Since she only has a cat, the lovely and wonderful Beanie, I was a bit skeptical about that title for her. I think Jason deserves it. You can find his new BeagleBone Beagle Cookbook. There'll be a link on Amazon and O'Reilly and all your normal technical bookstores if they still exist. At O'Reilly, you can use the coupon AUTHD, that is AUTHD, to get 30% off the paper or 40% off the electronic book. It may still be cheaper on Amazon. I'm very sorry about that. We have no control. Thank you, as always, to Christopher White for co-hosting and producing. And thank you for listening and reviewing. Yes, now you're obligated to review. Wherever you want, you can review to your lunch companions. That's fine. Or on iTunes. We appreciate it. Final thought for this week. Of course, it's going to be from Charles Schulz. Of course. I just have to choose one of these many choices. It's a long show, so it'll be a short final thought up to now. Happiness is a warm puppy.